John, I want to thank you so much for celebrating Earth Day with Xilva. We're here today to talk about your book, A Forest Journey, The Role of Trees in the Fate of Civilization. The book chronicles the rise and fall of civilizations in relation to the use of wood. And I think that the book carries an incredibly important conservation message, but it also gives us the information that we need to understand why the protection and restoration of forests is so important today.
A lot of new discoveries happened since the first iterations happened. For example, the discovery of the first true tree 385 million years ago called Archaeopteryx, and how that really changed the world. Because prior to and what I mean by first true tree is it had deep roots. It had actually, what's amazing, it had a trunk that was extremely almost identical to today's gymnosperms, and it had branches which had leaves. So what really fascinated me about the tree was how it made the earth livable for large, nominally large vertebrates, because a large vertebrate requires lots of oxygen, right, to metabolize, and the tree, its roots especially, its roots were able to produce, actually the leaves and the roots, to take down the carbon dioxide, which cooled down the earth significantly, and also the leaves through photosynthesis to create, to oxygenate the earth. So it created, like I say, it's the tree that changed the world. And that will bring us to Gilgamesh, because the area that Gilgamesh ruled was the first flag post for civilization. Well, okay, actually, in all religions, or at least in Judaism and Sumerian religions, the trees were heaven on earth and where God resided. Like, remember, God lived at the Garden of Eden, and the first a precept or order from God to Adam is protect the trees. That's the first thing in Genesis, is guard the trees, protect the trees. Okay, and in Gilgamesh's time, the trees were the abode of the gods. They didn't live on heaven; they lived in heaven, which was on earth in the forest. So Gilgamesh, being a Semitic, and being a lot of people have described him actually as an alpha male. Had to, he wasn't content just to like scribble things, in the sand, right? He was going to do the ultimate. He was going to conquer the gods by conquering the cedar forest. And as they, and I'll get into Enkidu now. So Enkidu has participated in this, destructive behavior. But then as they're, and this is also a continual theme, as they float down, on log raft, and suddenly Enkidu, his love for nature, like, kicks in. And and this is the first environmental ethic. He says to Gilgamesh, I think we've turned the cedar forest into a wasteland. And then he states, how are we going to, deal with the gods for our destruction? I think one of the ideas that really struck me as working on the book was exactly that, how once all the trees in the Middle East were cut down, how the Middle Eastern powers then went westward to the island of Crete, for example. And actually in the book I have images from that time of shipping timber from Crete to the Middle East. And I was on Crete, for example, during the summertime, and you can't find even a shade tree to protect you from the heat now. And to imagine that once that island was as full of wood as, say, the tropics, as the Amazon, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Would you say, given that point, would you say that conservation today is more important than ever?
Well, this goes into a big part of the book, which is new, is in the last 30 years, we've discovered many new important services that, in fact, existential services that trees provide. For example, I mean, it was discovered like in the 1990s, for example, that the tree's roots are the greater sequester of carbon than even the leaves themselves. And it's a real challenge. It's one of the, you might say, dark areas of forestry because, the roots go so deep that it's very difficult to understand, how much of a biomass those roots contain in a tree. It's estimated to be about 30% of the biomass are the roots. And the roots, what they do is they enable the sequestering of carbon by turning rainwater, which is diluted carbonic acid, into carbonates, which eventually end up in the sea as limestone, and then they're held in for hundreds of millions of years. But unfortunately, the industrialization of limestone, to change it into lime, to make, for example, cement, releases that carbon dioxide. So, and that brings up the whole idea of coal, that basically most of coal contains just ancient trees. And you might say the intelligence of nature, what happened in the natural process, the trees slowly got covered by earth, and that earth pressed down on the fallen logs, and that pressed out all the moisture, and so you only had pure carbon, but that was you might say protected by layer and layer and layer of earth from anybody's from releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So what we did in all our great intelligence was change that whole dig in right to the earth and take those.
Sorry, I just want to read you an extract from your article, Trees and Civilization, and it speaks to what you're saying now is humanity needs trees more than ever before, but this time intact.
Right. So beginning with coal, of extracting old trees and burning them, is what has brought us to the point that we're at. But also, and this is missed by almost everybody, is the great deforestation of the earth has also brought us into this crisis of global warming. Well, actually, in 1989, when the first edition was first published, even carbon capture wasn't considered that important. But also, what we call the new forestry is, first of all, we discovered that the whole, I guess you would call it dictum of the timber industries, that, forestry is a renewable resource, was totally false. That the anthropomorphizing of a tree was totally false. That trees were more vigorous when they were younger versus, and it turns out the older trees are far superior, like captures of carbon. In fact, if we look at trees as a crop, which has been the craziest idea possible, we've actually produced more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, not allowing the trees to grow, and because the greater a tree, the size of a tree, the greater is the leaf area to photosynthesize, and also the older trees they're like a carbon bank. Because of the many aspects of what we've learned in the last 30 years after the book was published. One of the most significant is, for example, like you said, you touched on it, trees and the role of precipitation is, for the longest time, up till about maybe a decade ago, we thought of all precipitation was caused by evaporation of the oceans. And we're learning that 40% of the precipitation in the world is created by evapotranspiration of the leaves. And that's a new, I think it's the last decade that people have really come to terms about precipitation and discovered, like I said, not only that trees provide 40% of the world's rainfall, which is very important for a thirsty world, but also acts as a relay for rain for great distances. For example, the trees in the Congo provide 40% of the water for the Nile. The trees of Scandinavia and Siberia relay rain all the way to China. Also, they're discovering that weather patterns are also created by forests. Just as we talk about ocean currents, changing ocean currents due to the melting of the ice in Greenland, the cutting down of trees is actually the newest discoveries in forestry, is that the forests themselves create, atmospheric movements that are crucial to human survival. And and as important also is trees form a defense, protecting millions and millions of people from very terrible diseases. Because what forests do is they provide a balance. And this is one thing that I really learned, and I hope people learn from my book. And it really, I never felt it so intensely, is the importance of wildlife diversity. Because wildlife diversity, protects us from various dangerous diseases, and Lyme disease is one example. So what happens is, when we have a forest, you have lots of specialized predators who keep down the population of generalized disease carrying generalized species. And when those predators are destroyed by cutting down the forest, destroying their habitat, the generalized animals, like, for example, mice, proliferate, and they form like the pool, for example, for the ticks that spread Lyme disease to be for the larvae. But and also another part of the book that I like to emphasize is the destruction of the bird migrations. Because when you kill off the forest, say in central and we call it the neotropics, southern Mexico and Central America, what you do is you kill off the birds that migrate. I couldn't believe it, like hummingbirds migrating for like, what, 4 or 5, 6,000, 7,000 miles a year. And those like hummingbirds, are, extremely valuable pollinators for a living Earth. And we have to realize, and this is one of the problems about the epidemic, the coronavirus, for example, is we don't realize we're part of nature because, basically people have some reason have gotten separated from the idea of being part of nature. And if we continue this notion, we're going to kill our species.
John, what would you, if you could pick one takeaway message, if that's even possible, what would it be?
Well, we're inextricably tied to the trees. Because without the trees, we would have had no civilizations. Without the trees, we would have no humanity. Because there would have been no settlement anywhere in the world possible without the trees. And so therefore we have to recognize our dependence on trees. We have to consider not only the wood from trees, but also the trees themselves as our mainstay of survival.